Is Shough the guy of the long-term future? And is Lane Kiffin failing his first test as the LSU Tigers head coach? We're talking about that and so much more today on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome, everyone, to a brand new edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in, as always. We got a lot to get to on this Let Me Talk to You Tuesday edition of the pod. Appreciate you, as always. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to us today wherever you get your podcasts and also over on our YouTube channel. And we got to start things off. We got to talk about the New Orleans Saints regular season just wrapped up on Sunday. And there's still some things we need to talk about as we head into the offseason. More importantly, is Tyler Shough, the starting quarterback for the Saints, the guy of the long-term future? Or is this more of a situation where Shough becomes more of the short-term bridge guy when it comes to the future of this franchise? Because everything that we saw over the second half of the season, the last 8 games that he played, he was markedly better than Spencer Rattler. Then again, that was a fairly low bar to kind of cross over. Overall, was very pleased with what I saw from him in these 8 games. He got better as time went on. But at the same time, I think we are going to be debating this for a minute. Was this, oh, hey, flash in the pan? Or can he be the guy that's going to lead us back to the promised land? And even if it's not back to the Super Bowl, just back to at least some form of relevancy. Because, I feel like a couple more years of getting top 10 picks and not getting a whole lot of results, it's going to feel a lot like insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And my question is Tyler Shough going to be a Jameis Winston, or is he going to be more along the lines of a Drew Brees, where he leads this team for an extended period of time, or is it going to be a 2-3 year experiment that falls flat on its face and you kind of have to rebuild again? Because when I look at this Saints team, I continually am reminded, especially the last 5 years, I am continually reminded of the Dallas Cowboys back in the late 90s, back the last time they were truly relevant. They could not get out of their own way after Troy Aikman retired. They got increasingly mediocre. Thankfully, they were able to find a guy that's been able to kind of keep this franchise somewhat afloat every other year in Dak Prescott. Hasn't gotten to a Super Bowl, but they were better. He was better than some of the other guys that popped up after Troy Aikman. Tony Romo notwithstanding. Tony did a decent job, but still just couldn't quite get them over the hump. But it felt like more often than not, Tony Romo-led Cowboys teams did not live up to the expectations that Jera had in place. But somehow, some way, he was able to stay around for way longer than I think any of us expected him to. Tyler Shough, meanwhile, again, 8 games, it's a very, very, very small sample size. But you look at what the Saints have done in the history of the NFL draft and getting quarterbacks in the draft of the last 5 to 10 years, you haven't seen a whole lot of guys. I bring up Garrett Grayson, the Ian Book nightmare. There's a just complete and utter mess when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler looked like there was potential. I will gladly admit I was kind of a fan of Spencer Rattler whenever they drafted him. I was like, okay, this seems like it could be a steal of the draft. Lo and behold, that has not worked out. I think it's been the other way around. Tyler Shough, a guy that I wasn't necessarily sold on because of the injuries, because he was in the mid-20s. His age is in the mid-20s, and you got him in the second round of the draft, where you probably could have got him in the 3rd or 4th round. You could have easily got him there and got him at more of a discount. But it's safe to say Kellen Moore saw something in him that a lot of us did not see. Am I going to agree with that as being the guy for the long term? Give me another season of Tyler Shough. If he stays healthy, I am like, okay, let's go. I want to see this guy for the next 5 to 7 years be the guy to lead this team. Because if he sustains what he does, what he did at the tail end of the 2025 season in 2026, I am absolutely here for it. Bottom line, I firmly believe that this is where the black and gold are going to go. And I think if Kellen Moore can have time to build weapons and get some dogs around him, I think he's going to let that boy play and he's going to cook. Because he was able to do this. He was throwing 200 yards, thrown to pretty much electricians and plumbers on that roster with Chris Olave out in the season finale against the Atlanta Falcons. Like, let's look real quick at what happened with the final score, 19-17. Fairly decent game overall. But let's look at the guys he was throwing to. Let's just look at that real quick. Jawan Johnson might be the one name that we can say that we know exists. That and Taysom Hill, obviously. That was 6 of the 23 receptions on the day. Dante Pettis and Audric Estime. I didn't know these guys were actually existed. These sounds like the auto-generated names you get on Madden franchise mode when you go into 2040. Dante Pettis, Audric Estime, 5 receptions apiece, a combined 103 yards receiving from those guys. That's off of 259 yards through the air for one Tyler Shough. Again, he was playing with nobodies. Kevin Austin Jr., 4 receptions for 37 yards. Ronnie Bell, 2 for 23. Samori Torre, 1 reception for 3 yards. And the only receiver to get a touchdown was Ronnie Bell. A really nice one at that. But still, that shows that he can do this with anybody. You know, we make fun of the fact, I said it, him throwing to pretty much former electricians and plumbers. I mean, these guys are NFL wide receivers, but they're clearly on that like C to D tier wide receiver, comparatively speaking to what we see with the rest of the league. You look at the opponent, they threw to Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts Sr., and Drake London. Those are some pretty good names. Those are some names that you know. It felt like what I saw on Sunday afternoon looked like the Saints in mid-2014, 2015, after they got rid of Aaron Brooks. You just didn't have a whole lot of faith in that team. Fast forward to now, it feels like more of the same. Not necessarily a whole lot of faith in those guys because they just don't have that name that pops off. Like, I don't think I've ever heard of Audric Estime very often this season. Kevin Austin Jr., same thing. It's guys you don't necessarily know a whole hell of a lot about. They did a really good job. I'm not going to hate those guys for what they did on the field. It's just the names don't pop off, to me at least. If you get some guys like Chris Olave, I think needs to be in consideration for a spot on this team in 2026 and beyond, is getting these guys in place that can be weapons for Shough. Kamara feels like he's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. Getting a good wide receiver would help. But I think more importantly, getting the offensive line, because 4 sacks on Sunday, unacceptable in my mind, especially at the end of the season. You don't want to have your offensive line just destroy somebody. That's where I'm at, is I'd much rather see Tyler Shough with some dogs rather than him run around with a bunch of electricians, because I think you have a better chance to win ball games with some true weapons. And hopefully, as we get closer to the 2026 draft and free agency, we can see some creative accounting, some Loomisnomics actually work in the favor. We may not like Mickey Loomis for what he's been able to do for this team the last few years in the draft, but we do know he can kind of pull off some impressive book cooking that I would be intrigued to see how that works IRL. Just going to go ahead and leave it at that. But now we got to flip it on over to the LSU Tigers. There's no doubt in my mind that everybody's kind of looking at what LSU is doing or lack thereof in the transfer portal, because I see this team right here, right now. You are losing out on a really good QB, Michael Van Buren. He's out the door. Then Caden Durham, he's going over to the University of Florida. The portal's wide open, and there's not a real splash a couple days in. It feels like to me that we can kind of look at him and say he's not the transfer portal king that we expected him to. The only one that you were able to kind of get was Jackson Harris. Weston Davis, he decided, hey, I'm going to enter the portal and I'll step right back in. You missed out on one of the top players in the entire damn portal in Brendan Sorsby out of Cincinnati. He committed to Texas Tech. They offered him $5 million. You can't get him. Trinidad Chambliss, it seems like he's going to stick around at Ole Miss if they actually give him grant him his appeal for another senior season. And it just feels like this team is spinning its wheels. You're just sitting there like, what is going on? Like everything is the carousel's starting to slow down, and you aren't without a date to the prom, basically, when it comes to quarterback. DJ Lagway, I think he's going to be going to Florida State based off of some stuff I was seeing online earlier today. Sam Leavitt of Arizona State feels like he is going to go there because, again, that carousel's starting to slow down, not just for LSU, but for all the other quarterbacks. We're seeing guys pair off. It's a lot like cuffing season in the world of college football. But if he can't get Sam Leavitt of Arizona State, this team is in quite a bind when it comes to the offensive side of the football. Because the other guys that you're kind of looking at is Dylan Raiola of Nebraska. I don't necessarily know if I'd want to have him. Deuce Knight out of Auburn. I definitely don't want somebody from the SEC that didn't do a whole hell of a lot. I think you need to look at those are really your only option at this point when it comes to getting good players out of the transfer portal. I don't necessarily think a guy from Nebraska is going to pop off and make this LSU fan base that is already just starving for another opportunity at a national championship feel all that great. Again, especially because you have players that are entering the portal, and this is on both sides of the ball. You're seeing more players kind of head on out the door, like Ethan Callaway and Zion Williams, Teron Francis. Those guys all have entered the transfer portal and are likely on the way out. Some other players are making their moves over to other teams across the SEC. It's just not a great look overall if you are talking about this LSU Tigers team in the first transfer portal class. Ole Miss did a great job last year. 2025, they were number 4 with all the signees they were able to kind of rack up because of the portal. Now you got this new brand spanking new portal window. Somehow, some way, they can't get, a megastar in a sense. They did wind up getting, I saw this earlier thanks to one of my friends over on Discord, saying that Malachi Thomas, a tight end out of the University of Pitt, committed to LSU. So that's a good step in the right direction, but you need to find somebody to throw to this tight end, some of the other guys that you're going to wind up getting. Because this offense, the full expectation is for that to be significantly better. But at the end of the day, I think we need to see what Lane Kiffin can do. If he has somebody lying in wait to come aboard, be it in the transfer portal or in the OG National Signing Day period that's coming up. That second wave is not too far behind either. So you've got to kind of question a lot of those things right here, right now. I firmly believe that we see LSU get into a better position, but Lane Kiffin, as of right now, on Tuesday, January 6th, and we're taping this on Monday evening, it feels less and less likely that this LSU team is going to get it done in the portal in its first season. That's really the first test for Lane Kiffin. I think the biggest point of his hype has been what he's been able to do with the transfer portal, where he's been able to excel in that space. Where is that? That's going to be the $1 million question we're all wondering. Who's he going to get to be the QB1? With Michael Van Buren done, Garrett Nussmeier, he said adios. I think Jawan Johnson, he's also out the door. He could have been a really good alternative. Now you're sitting there without a quarterback heading into 2026. That is a pop-on look if there ever was one. So you need to find that guy and maybe get some others when it comes to commitments during the National Signing Day stuff later on this month, early February. You need to kind of move quickly because that portal, it's going to close up real quick. And if you're standing there with your hands out, being like, where's my guy? Like, you're just sitting there like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Nobody around. You're just like, where's my QBs? And that would be a horrible look for Lane Kiffin and LSU. And it makes you wonder if that's mainly because the players aren't necessarily 100% certain that the guys on staff that have been announced are going to remain committed to their job. Because I was seeing some reports saying that Charlie Weiss Jr. was at least under consideration for the head coaching job for the New York Football Giants. Could he make the move over to the pros? That's a question that I think a lot of people are going to be asking. And even if he doesn't get the head coaching job, he could very well make a jump over as an offensive coordinator in the NFL if the opportunity arises. And that would hurt, potential recruits and potential commits to jump over to the transfer portal to be alongside Charlie Weiss Jr., who managed to turn a guy that nobody really knew a whole hell of a lot about in Trinidad Chambliss into a really hot commodity when it comes to quarterbacks and what has been a kind of mid QB class heading into 2026. But that'll about do it for today's edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in. We'll be back with you tomorrow with another edition of the pod. Make sure you subscribe to us today on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, iHeart Podcast, Amazon Podcast, you name it, we are there. Appreciate you listening in. As always, we'll talk to you mañana.